Carolina bows out in typical fashion for this season. The only problem, this season hasn't been befitting of the standard of the University of North Carolina Tar Heels.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Monday, March 24th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listener watch. To get started, get your coffee, whatever it is that you're doing. I want to give a special shout out to all the everydayers who are with us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course, our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome into the offseason, although there is no offseason because the portal opens today. And quite frankly, this is some of the busiest time in the podcast every year because everybody wants to know what's going on in the portal, rumors, what's going to happen with the current roster, all of that stuff. And I will be with you for every step of the way. So don't bow out. Stay with us through all of it. My background, for those of you watching on YouTube, is a little bit different than it ordinarily is. I'm at a hotel in Dallas where we're recording Bracket Breakdown, our partnership with Locked On and Amazon for the NCAA tournament, and I'm just part of that coverage. So that's why things look a little bit weird today. Tomorrow and going forward here, I'm going to share my scholarship chart, kind of update where it's at as you remove the three guys that are out of eligibility. We'll have a season post-mortem, like what went wrong. I've got a list going on my phone and it's lengthy. What all of that and much more coming up in the next several days. But today what I want to do is I want to set up the offseason, kind of tie a bow on the Ole Miss game and some things that made it emblematic of the entire season. We will do our Four Corners recap and shady stat of the game, kind of shady stat of a career, if we're being honest. And we'll talk about the Lady Tar Heels still rolling, and we'll do the weekend whip around and all of that. So let's dive into tying a bow on this Ole Miss game. Last year, if you'll recall, Carolina lost in the Sweet 16 to Alabama. That was a game that in many ways did not resemble what had happened all season long. Things went differently than they had throughout the season. A prime example of that, RJ Davis goes 0 of 9 from 3. Literally the only game all season where he did not make at least one three-point shot. Consequently, Carolina loses. They probably win if he just makes one of those, which also would have put him above 40% for the first and only time from 3 in his career. That's how last season ended. This season, things ended. By the way, if you're noticing, I just realized on screen for those of you watching, every now and again, the color changes a little bit behind me. I've got the NCAA tournament on just to timestamp it. I'm recording during the UConn-Florida game in its early second half. So that's what's going on behind me there. So with it, again, last year ended in a way that was not befitting of the rest of the season. This year ends in a perfect representation of what had happened so often throughout this season with Carolina's inability to get things going in the first half and having to make a ferocious comeback in the second half. You know, we saw that early season against Kansas and Dayton and Michigan State and Florida, who I'm literally watching play right now, right? Like, so, and that's just a couple of them. So often that happened this season. And of course, it did again against Ole Miss. It had happened against Duke, literally the week before against Duke in the AC semifinals. And this game was almost an exact replica of that game where Carolina gets down by 22 against Duke. It was 24, makes a furious comeback all the way back. Carolina in this game against Ole Miss got down by double digits in the first 4 minutes and 10 seconds of the game. Doesn't that sound familiar? The deficit grew to as many as 19 in the first half. The halftime deficit was 18. And then I feel like this has happened a lot too with these games. It's not like Carolina suddenly makes a run coming out of halftime. The opposition has often continued to take the reins out of the halftime gate, and that happened here. The Ole Miss lead grew to 22 a couple different times, but the latest of those was it was 28-50 with 17:35 left in the game. But as you know, as we've seen all season long, like you could smell it coming. Like I sat there at halftime. I remember my thoughts on Friday during this game. Well, this is a massive hole, but there have been bigger that they've fought back from, and it's not a matter of if, but when the furious comeback happens. The question is just, will they get over the hill with it? Because from that point, when Carolina was down 28-50, they went on a 36-16 run, outscoring Ole Miss by 20 over the next 16 and a half minutes, drew within 2 with a minute to go, but then that was it. Couldn't get over the hump. And Sean Padula hits that dagger wing 3. And that was it. That was it. And that was all. So tough. Now, before I talk about how un-Carolina this is, hear me say this loud and clear. I am wildly proud of these guys for their heart and their effort and their energy in the second half. I'm so grateful for all the blood and sweat and tears they poured into this thing and the way at which that came together. Well done. But, it had to be all 40 minutes, and it simply wasn't. You can't win an NCAA tournament game doing that. I often text with Tar Heel alum from the basketball team, David Chadwick. We talk a lot about Carolina basketball. We're both Braves fans. We'll text about that. We're both in ministry, so we'll text back and forth about faith things as well. But we were texting after this game, and he said to me, and David, I know you're probably listening to this on your walk right now. David listens to the podcast while he's walking. So David, good morning. I hope your walk's going well. He said that this game, I love how David put this, is why I want to share it, was a microcosm of the macrocosm of the season. And that's so, we often use the word microcosm, but rarely do we say macrocosm. And that's exactly what this was. This was a microcosm, a smaller example of the bigger, complicated issues at play. And that's when you look up macrocosm, that's what it is like a bigger, complicated, convoluted thing. And so I thought that was so well put by David. I've been saying to people this weekend that the only consistency in this season was inconsistency. You didn't know if you were going to get the energy in the first half or the second half. Good 3-point shooting or poor 3-point shooting. Good free throw shooting or poor free throw shooting. Both of those we had seen literally flip-flop back and forth from bad from 3 and free against Duke to phenomenal against San Diego State on 3s and frees, and then right back to not good on 3s and frees in the season-ending loss to Ole Miss. In the YouTube chat after the game, Great Day to Be a Tar Heel asked me, Isaac, why do you think we have these starts under Hubert Davis, especially this year? Twice, okay, but it seems like there was so much lethargic effort and no leadership. Well, you answered the question right there with those two last things. Throughout the season, rarely, there have been times, but rarely has there been consistent levels of effort and energy, and I would add connectedness from tip to final horn. There have been pockets. There have been 20 minutes. There have been 16 minutes. There have been 35. You're right, like all of that. But rarely have they combined that all as they did against San Diego State. And even that game, if we're being honest, there was lethargy out of the gate with the 5 or 6 turnovers in the first couple minutes there. And then the second part of that is the leadership you asked about. This what I vividly remember the day last summer when I said to Coach Rob on one of our shows after he had been at Carolina camp in the summer and watching those camp games. I said to him, Coach, I'm worried, I'm concerned about who takes the mantle of leader now that Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram are gone. And I remember he kind of had trouble thinking and processing through that as well. And I think we've seen that throughout the season. Now, there are times when I've said it. I think Seth Trimble's that guy. Like the dudes respect him. He is all in all the time, right? Like while the macro of the team might not be, like I feel like Seth is gangbusters always. And I think the guys follow that example. And I think the leadership is there with him, but we just don't see it. And here's a stark reminder of that lack of leadership team-wide this season. As I was thinking through the end of RJ Davis's career, I was reminded of Cormac Ryan's comments at the post-press conference following the Alabama loss. Remember, somebody asked RJ Davis about his poor shooting in that game. RJ, in his emotion, he doesn't know at that point if he's coming back. He might think that's his last game. He's struggling to find the words of how to process it, and it just kind of breaks down. And Cormac cuts in and just like lays the woodshed to this reporter in a very kind but firm and direct way. And it was like, you do not get to sit here and say that, because this young man, because Cormac's old, is the heart and soul of this team. It's the ACC Player of the Year, for crying out loud. How dare you, sir, besmirch his good name, was basically the thought there. And that is the leadership that was lacking on and off the court this season. All of this to say, and this is what I wanted to get to, the inconsistency we've seen, the inability to put it together regularly and be connected regularly is not North Carolina Tar Heels basketball. I haven't wanted to discuss that or talk about it through the season because I just didn't think it was appropriate yet until we knew the final tally on the season, until the final bell rung, or whatever you want to say. But now that it's over and said and done, I do feel comfortable saying what we saw this season from the Tar Heels is not befitting of the University of North Carolina. We've seen that, it seems like, multiple times in the past couple years, and that quite simply has to change this offseason. There cannot be another season like this, or things need to change at a major level. So all that to say, this offseason is massively crucial. That's why I said I want to use this segment to set up the offseason. It's critical. You have to find the talent. You got to go out and get, like Carolina, I thought was talented this year. But part of it is you've got to find even higher level talent. You've got to find the right talent, because it ain't just about getting a collection of talented players. It's got to be the right guys that fit together. How often have I said this year, it's been about roster construction. So you can have the 5 most talented dudes in the nation, but if they don't fit together, it doesn't matter, and a team is going to beat you. I think another part of it, find talent, find the right talent, and be willing to pay for the right talent. I just, that's the cost of doing business in this day and age. And if Carolina can't or won't do that, then they're going to continue to lag behind. And that's why I'm so hopeful that this Jim Tanner hire is going to be so critical. Part of this also for the offseason is Carolina is going to have to quickly here, which they've already been having these conversations, I'm sure, but discern who's leaving and who's staying. And that's conversations I will guess on later in the week. We'll have stay and go conversations. Those are always fun. And some of that, unfortunately, in this day and age is who's leaving of their own volition and who's kind of being gently asked to leave, as it may be. So for me, next season, 25-26, North Carolina must reestablish themselves. They must restore themselves to the top of not only the ACC, but to the top of the nation, the national ranks, to show that things are this is the University of North Carolina. Some of that might be schedule differences, right? Like you might not need to go out and have 57 quad one games in your non-con slate. And that's okay. You can still be a really good basketball team, but it can help your resume and it can help you build some confidence, build some connectivity as a team. So going into next year, similar to going into last year, Carolina is not going to be given the benefit of the doubt. They're going to have to earn it. They're going to have to step up. And as I said earlier, the portal opens today. And so this whole offseason starts in earnest right now. Right now. Continues to set the tone for who the Tar Heels will be next season. So make it happen. And let's also say here before we move on, there's a lot of pain, both the emotional and physical, associated with the end of the season. Like literal physical pain for Jalen Withers. Don't have an update specifically on him yet. I don't know when we'll get that, if we're being honest, just because the season is over. I'm sure things will come out at some point, but we don't know yet. Probably some literal pain for RJ Davis, as he had a hard fall on the floor, like right at the end of the game there. Of course, because he's RJ Davis, stood up and still made his and one free throw, which leads me to wrap this segment with the shady stat of the game. Yes, we're doing it early, which is really the shady stat of the career. I had posted this all over social media because this is a stat, a factoid I've been holding on to now for 2 or 3 seasons because I realized it, I think, after the run to the national championship game, that at that point, both RJ and Caleb Love, neither had missed a game ever in their North Carolina career. And now RJ finishes his 5-year North Carolina career having never missed a North Carolina game. In his 5 years as a Tar Heel, North Carolina has played 175 official games. RJ Davis has suited up for every last one of them. Not only has he suited up, but he's played in every single one of them. And not only has he played in every single one of them, but he's played double-digit minutes in every single game of his Tar Heel career. That, like, do you realize how difficult that is to do? To show up when you're a 6'0" guy that, like, somebody replied to my tweet about it, like, well, that means he's not playing hard enough. Are you kidding me? Have you seen RJ Davis play basketball? You're telling me he doesn't play hard enough? You're a box score looker. That's all you are, random person, because this dude has put everything on the line for this university, and his body has held up even when it probably shouldn't have. RJ Davis, phenomenal, phenomenal stuff. And of course, his final basket in a Carolina uniform is a perfect representation of his toughness. That crazy high arcing shot off the glass that fell, made the free throw despite being some sort of hurt, to bring Carolina within 2 like that was the last points of Carolina's season and RJ Davis's career. Great stuff there. Well, the numbers suggest that Carolina's 3-point shooting told this tale of this game against Ole Miss, but not only the game against Ole Miss, but the season in totality. I'll explain what I mean, plus the rest of the Four Corners recap coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about 5-hour energy. Daylight savings, man, it has snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-hour energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. So whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in around to golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-hour energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up way too late covering the NCAA tournament, and I tell you what, I'm going on about 3 hours of sleep right now, and 5-hour energy is the jolt I need to help keep me going today and every day. So whether I'm at a game or traveling like I am right now, 5-hour energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. So head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 different flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. I love that combo. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one right now? Go ahead, grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Time for the Four Corners recap. We're going to fly through this thing a little bit because I talked way too long in segment 1. I just got passionate about wrapping up the season there and what Carolina's got to do going forward. So, number 1, 3-point shooting tells the tale of not only this game, but the season. Here's what I mean. Carolina against Ole Miss went 5 of 24. That's 20.8%. That's not good. In Carolina, this season, played 37 basketball games. In 11 of them, they shot under 30%. In those games, Carolina went 2-9. And in the 26 games that they shot 30% or better, they were 21-5. This is a team that should have been able to do that consistent. Like 30% is not that high of a threshold. Like 3 out of every 10 threes you should be able to put in as a team if the right guys are taking the right shots. But it was strong, RJ Davis, all of that. But similar to last year's Alabama game, in this game against Ole Miss, if you maybe hit 1, maybe 2 more threes, and you're 7 of 24 instead of 5 of 24, you probably win this basketball game, and that comeback's legit. And even if you made 2 more, you're still under 30% for this game. Like, that's not too much to ask. Crazy stuff. 3-point shooting tells the tale. Four Corners recap point number 2. I was surprised, given the stakes and the situation, that Coach Davis stuck with keeping the guys that had 2 fouls on the bench in the first half. There were 4 different Tar Heels that picked up 2 fouls in the first half. It was Van Allen Lubin, Seth Trimble, Ian Jackson, and Jalen Washington. With Ian, I get keeping him on the bench because he's a freshman in his second ever NCAA tournament game. He's fasting for Ramadan. It's an afternoon game, so he hasn't really been able to have any fluids or food or anything yet. With Jalen Washington, I get it, right? Like he's getting bullied. This was prior to when he had that nice stretch in the second half. He got bullied. I mean, just beat up on in the first half. So I get not putting him back in. But I feel like if I'm Coach Davis, I'm looking at what's happening in this game and the way the lead continues to grow and grow and grow. And I feel like I would have taken some shots at putting Seth and at least Seth and maybe Van Allen back in for just a couple minutes here or there. I trust Seth implicitly to stay away from that third foul, aside from some freak thing, which is going to happen. And essentially Van Allen Lubin as well. And I feel like part of the reason I say this is because had the lead at halftime not been 18 or grown to 22 in the second half, Carolina's furious comeback probably could have gotten over the hump. And I feel like bringing Seth back in, bringing Van Allen back in really could have helped that, but he didn't. Anyway, that's just me second guessing. And that's part of what I'm supposed to do. Right. But if it's me, it's worth the risk to get some minutes from those guys, even though they've got two fouls in the first half. Four corners recap, point number 3. Turnovers. I talked about being a major storyline in this game, that Ole Miss simply doesn't turn the ball over, and they get you to turn the ball over. So Carolina had to be really tough with the ball and try to get turnovers. And it's wild because Carolina only committed 9, not too bad against this defense, and they forced Ole Miss into 14 turnovers for Ole Miss. I think that was one off their season high, if I remember what I looked at correctly. And so this game was an inverse for them. On the season, they averaged forcing 14 turnovers and themselves only turning it over 9 times. Literally, it was flipped from that. And so very well done by Carolina on that regard, both in terms of forcing turnovers. I think they had 8 steals and not turning the ball over too much. In fact, Carolina led points off turnovers 16-10. So they did what they needed to do in that statistical category. And some others. Here's another thing. Similarly confounding. Four corners recap, point number 4. Ole Miss is a bad rebounding team. Carolina is a strong, not elite rebounding team. Coming in, Ole Miss in outside the 300, like literally outside the top 300 in rebounding this season. They out-rebounded Carolina in this game. Literally one of the worst teams in the nation out-rebounds Carolina by 6, 40-34. Interestingly, the offensive rebounds were tied at 9, and so the issue was on the defensive glass, where Ole Miss just got 31 offensive rebounds. That was tied for the third most Carolina had given up all season to one of the worst rebounding teams they played all season. That's a matter of want and will and desire. So, but again, on the offensive rebounding, Carolina and Ole Miss were tied, and Carolina led points off of like second chance points. So they did well in points off turnovers. They led that. They led second chance points, and they were great with assisting. Second highest assist percentage of the season, 17 assists on 24 field goals. That's 70.8%. That's phenomenal. Again, the second highest this season. And yet, despite those 3 silver linings I just mentioned, Carolina still loses this basketball game. Why? Because it's not about things that didn't happen down the stretch of the second half. It's about the hole they dug for themselves in the first. A lot of that game was the shooting. Like, the shooting was a massive issue in this game. As Coach Williams always says, everything looks better when the ball goes through the basket, and it didn't in this game. And Carolina couldn't do enough of the other intangibles to make up for it. And I thought part of it too was Carolina was having a lot of success inside, which is why I wish Van Allen would have come back in for some first half minutes. They were successful over and over and over again inside, and just didn't stick with it. In fact, let me see just real quick here. See if we can do some quick math. I didn't think about it in advance. 24 minus 5 is 19. 63 minus 24 is 39. 19 divided by 39. So yeah, Carolina shot 48.7% on twos and just needed to do that more. And they didn't. And that's what happens sometimes. Well, okay. Here's some good news. Speaking of silver linings, while the men may be done, the women are still playing. They got a first round victory. Great stuff. And now they play again tonight to hopefully move along to the round of 16. We'll talk about that and the rest of the weekend whip around coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time, imagine watching your favorite team live. You feeling the energy of the crowd. You're witnessing unforgettable moments. Like, I know the loss was so frustrating Friday, but can you imagine being there in Milwaukee for that incredible comeback? How electric must that have been? There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. And getting tickets shouldn't be stressful, and that's where Game Time comes in. They make it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. And they also use a thing I love, this feature called Game Time Picks. It's curation, making it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, to concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. I was just checking out the Game Time app for tickets ahead of tonight's game with the women against West Virginia. Man, there's some amazing deals for that. So check it out. And if you find a better price somewhere else, the lowest price guarantee on Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day. It's time for the weekend whip around. We got to start with Carolina women's basketball, where Carolina, the 3 seed, beats 14th seed Oregon State on Saturday, 70-49. It's the fourth straight year for Courtney Banghart's team winning at least one NCAA tournament game. Carolina led this thing comfortably after one. They got off to a hot start, but the Beavers cut it to 2 at the break. But then the third quarter happened, and that was ball game. Carolina shut the lights out. The Tar Heels led the third quarter, scoring 30-9. Good grief, the game was out of reach after that, and this was the largest NCAA tournament win of the Banghart era. Lexi Donarski leads the way with 19 points, hit 5 3-pointers in that third quarter. I mean, that's crazy stuff there from Lexi. And in the Carolina record book, Alyssa Ustby is now the all-time Carolina leading rebounder at 1,253. For Carolina, this is the 6th time this season holding an opponent under 50 points. I mean, that defense is so good. They're going to need it to show up again tonight, by the way. We'll talk about that in a second. And it just cannot stress enough how important it is to get Alyssa Ustby and Renaya Kelly back. I know they played there at the end of the ACC tournament, but then having the time off to get them more fully healthy, and here we go. Now, we look ahead to tonight, looking for the second Sweet 16 of the Banghart era. Carolina playing the 6-seeded West Virginia, almost said Cavaliers because of Virginia, Mountaineers in Carmichael. Remember, Carolina is hosting this thing at home. 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, ESPN 2. West Virginia beat Columbia in the first round. They come in 25-7 overall on the season. They were 13-5 in Big 12 play, tied for 4th in the conference, and lost in the semifinals to TCU and Haley Van Lith. West Virginia actually favored in this game, interestingly enough, by 1.5 points at FanDuel. Let's make that happen. And so there we go. A couple keys to the game I just want to mention really quick. This is a matchup of 2 phenomenal defensive teams. If you look at BartTorvik.com, these 2 teams rank 8th and 9th in the nation in defensive efficiency. West Virginia 8th, Carolina 9th. That's going to make for a super rad matchup. And the potential deciding factor for this game, for me, is Carolina taking care of the ball. Part of what makes West Virginia so good defensively is that they're literally number 1 in the entire nation in defensive turnover percentage, meaning the percentage of possessions with which they force the opposition into a turnover. 33%, basically 1 out of every 3 possessions, they're forcing a turnover. That's crazy. The good news, Carolina is elite at not turning the ball over. They're 26th nationally at an offensive turnover percentage of just 18.4%. So Carolina's ability to hang on the ball or West Virginia's ability to get the ball could really be a deciding factor here. On the season, the Mountaineers are just 5-5 in true road games, and so Carolina needs to take advantage of that. I think Alyssa Ustby's rebounding and all-around game are going to be critical, but because of the defense, we really, the Tar Heels need Renaya Kelly to step up, need Lexi Donarski to step up, and just contributions from anywhere else, right? whoever else can chip in a couple buckets here or there is going to be a massive input for this team. A name to note, JJ Quinterly from West Virginia. She is the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year and their leading scorer. So really going to have to contend with her on both ends. I tell you what, we have been really long here already, and so I'm not going to go through the rest of the weekend whip around because I know you've got other things to get onto. We'll discuss that throughout the week, but lots of other good stuff going on in Carolina athletics there. I guess I will highlight wrestling because they had the NCAA championships this weekend, and Lachlan McNeil gets 5th at 149, becoming the 6th Tar Heel with 3 or more All-American honors. Man, that's great. So great for him. Obviously, lots more to get to, but again, I don't want to keep you, and we're already lengthy today. So for now, I'll just say, if you've not subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on YouTube already, make sure you do that. If you've not joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord chat, we'd love to have you in there. That link is in the show notes, and it's free to join. Also, now that it's portal season, man, we're going to be talking about transfer rumors all the time, but I'm going to specifically be dropping those with the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders. That link is also in the show notes where you can sign up for that. You guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Good luck to the ladies tonight. We'll talk about that tomorrow and so much more. But until then, peace.